Hello everyone, my name is Kareem Awadalla. I'm an Egyptian journalist immigrated to the US like 5 years ago. I'm your guest host for only one episode, and since no one can fire me, I decided to ask all the politically incorrect questions that I have and usually Americans shy from answering. For the people that will help me find answers for that is my controversial guest. We'll start with Anwar Khidr. Anwar is Arab, born and raised in Lebanon, and he lived in Lebanon during the Civil War. He has lots of stories to tell us. But the important part is that Anwar is Republican. He identifies as conservative. He voted for Trump and most probably will vote for him again. On the other hand, we have Scott MacArthur, born and raised in New Jersey, upper middle class American. And in his school, there was only one black kid and one Hispanic kid. You would imagine he's the definition of a white privilege, yet he's bleeding heart liberal. We have lots of questions. I know all of them would be politically incorrect, so don't hold me accountable for that. But we'll start with Anwar. You were born in Lebanon.
Yes.
Lebanon before 1975 was heaven on earth.
Yes, actually was Paris of the Middle East.
Was Paris. Do you know anything about Lebanon during that time, Scott? Have you heard anything about it?
I do. I mean, I heard that the catchphrase is Paris of the Middle East, and I know about the Civil War and so forth. I'm not intimately knowledgeable about it, but I do know a little bit.
So Lebanon during the 60s and the 70s was very westernized, hippies and parties in the streets, drinks and drugs, and women are very liberal until 1975. So tell us what happened in 1975.
Well, the Civil War started in 1970. There was a big, something big happened on that year, but it didn't happen overnight. There was something led into that accident. You know, people start fighting each other. And actually it started in 1969.
1969.
That's where the first signs of Civil War started. You know,
So explain, Scott, as being American, you said that you're not intimate with that, but do you understand what was the reason of the Civil War in the United States? I'm curious to see what is covered in the American media.
Ostensibly, I mean, it was about religion, but everybody knows that it's never about religion, that religion is used to separate the people in order for the factions to get what they want. Like most wars, we would assume it has to do with natural resources. I don't know, quite frankly, what the cause of the war in Lebanon was. I know that it was the height of the Cold War, and I know that it was turned into, anyway, whether it was the beginning of it or whether it turned into that became a proxy war between the United States and Russia.
We're going to speak about that because I want to start with what do you think was the reason, the real reason that started the Civil War?
Well, the real reason was, as I said, in 1969, because of the Cairo Treaty in Cairo. And this is when they allowed the Palestinians, allowed them the armed revolution, you know, they can fight Israel from Lebanon and authorized for carrying weapons for the Palestinian. And this is where it all started. And this is trouble started, you know, at the border of Lebanon and Israel. And that went to 1973, where there were few clashes with the army, with the Lebanese army and the Palestinian. Or like a smaller side, until 1975. The main reason was, at that time, is the Christian people were against that.
Against
the armed forces for the Palestinians to fight from Lebanon. And this is where the whole thing started.
And then the Muslims were pro-arming the Palestinians.
And, you know, liberation of Palestine, you know, and all that. So the country was divided on that issue.
Now, you gave us a more scoped down, like a more zoned-in analysis, the reason that this happened.
That started, you know.
In the Middle East, the conspiracy theory is consumed highly. People usually believe that the United States or Russia, they are usually colluding or plotting something. And to what extent do you think they believe the United States and Russia and the big players had something to do with that?
You know, they do have a big role in that. You know, and any treaty happened, you know, any agreement, any wherever there are two people meeting together, they are involved. They have something to say. They put the pressure on you, on me, on this. They were always involved.
So the United States and Russia, you believe, were involved?
They were always, and when they, came up with that treaty, the Cairo Treaty, it's in Egypt, they were very much involved. It wasn't just, the Lebanese people and the Palestinian people. It wasn't the
so
Lebanese
Americans
government.
and
The Americans.
Who do you think had more influence, Americans or Russians?
To be honest, again, I was very young at that time, but I have my understanding that was, the Americans were more involved, more influence. They on both sides. They were very pushing on it, and because Israel that was the only American ally basically in the Middle East for the Americans, and this is something they gave the Palestinian the authority to fight Israel from there. And it's just
to create a chaos in this.
It just doesn't make make sense.
Well, this is the way usually the Middle East.
That's the way we always felt.
Yeah. Well, you explained it in a very clear way, and usually in the Middle East, this is the way they consume conspiracy theories, that they believe that the United States is trying to destabilize the region for the sake of Israel, and this is what they are thinking. Now, regardless, I'm not saying that I believe in this or I don't believe in that, but I just want to know, what do you think, being American and you're a Democrat, and Democrats usually push diplomatic solutions more than wars. So do you think the United States is doing what Anwar was saying?
Are they doing now, or were they
Let's
doing
speak about
then?
Like, do they always play in other countries?
Well, American policy in the Middle East was always to keep it unstable, keep the governments unstable so that we could control the oil fields. That has always been American policy. They will never say that. They will never admit that, but that has always been American policy.
How does that make you feel?
And that doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. That is American policy.
How does that make you feel as being American? How do you feel?
It's a double-edged sword because you feel philosophically you don't like it, but practically you like your lifestyle and you like the way you live in the United States, and therefore part of the way we live in the United States is because we have controlled the oil flow in of the world. Therefore, if somebody has to be in control, it should be us.
That's very interesting. Now, does that pose any human rights questions? Like, do you feel bad about the people who were killed in Lebanon and in other countries that were, as you say, destabilized by the United States? Does that pass through your mind?
Of course.
How does that make you feel? You don't take, I want to say that there is a slight hypocrisy in here, because you are very much liberal. You fight, all the time for dreamers and DACA, and you think it's not humane to separate kids in the borders. But yet, at the same time, you were aware, and you're still aware, that the United States, as what you're saying, colludes in other countries' benefits for the sake of the United States. And this doesn't seem to be worrying you. You're kind of okay with it. So you're picking and choosing your battles. You only support...
It depends. Are you talking about the war itself, or are you talking about who controls and who gets to govern?
I'm taking it from the human rights angle now.
Right, but again,
so the human rights angle, you fight for some human rights angle.
But you're talking about during a war, during the struggle for control, there are wars. And the wars couldn't be unjust, and the wars are unjust to the human beings that are...
But you said that the United States has always and still is, having its own ways to guarantee the control of the oil supply. So it's not only during the wartime. You said that it's still happening up to the moment. You're still okay with it. You don't feel...
Right, but what I'm saying, though, is that up until, and again, different presidencies have been different policies, but I do believe that if the United States is in control, they will support a government that will have less human rights abuses than if, say, Russia or
but you, as an American,
another country
that's great.
did.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. But as an American, you don't find any problem with supporting a less human rights.
No, I would. I definitely would.
But you said that for the sake of the benefits of the United States, you're okay with doing that a little bit.
If it has
will
to do,
guarantee
if it's
your
a war between,
power.
no, during a war between us and another power that is going to control that, who is less benevolent, less.
So basically, if it's in the best interest of the United States, you're okay with breaching some of the human rights if it will guarantee a bigger cause.
But a balanced approach. It's not a black and white answer.
Yeah.
It's the answer is in the gray area.
Well, I admire your honesty.
There's no black and white answer to the question you're asking. Yeah. You're looking for a simple answer, and there is no simple answer.
Mm-hmm. Well, I admire that you acknowledge that sometimes the United States, is not always in compliance with human rights. They would breach it for the sake of their own benefits, which is every country does that. I have a question for you, but I want to go back
to that. There are degrees to that as to what's acceptable and what isn't. So
well, I have a question about this part, but let's go back to Anwar now. And as you said before, you felt that the United States was having so much, she had so much stakes in what's happening in Lebanon. They were affecting the civil war. How did that make you feel as Lebanese when you see a foreign country affecting your day-to-day life?
Well, actually, it wasn't a feeling. It was an actual thing. It was like actual involvement in the political process in Lebanon. It made me feel, well, again, it's not right or wrong. There's sometimes, it helps. As a superpower, we are a small country. Sometimes it doesn't, and it's just creates problems because the country is divided. During the war, it was divided. The United States was sided with one side against the other, and that's what creates the problems.
Which side? The United States was with the Christian side.
Basically, and even the United States, it switched positions as
positions between
interest required for them to do.
Because in the beginning, they actually approved the arming of Palestinians. So they were with the Muslim side, and then they changed in the middle to support the Christians. So living through the civil war, you held the United States accountable for that.
Now when the United States the Marines, they sent the Marines to Beirut as a peacekeeper. And all of a sudden, the Marines were sided with someone bombing the other people. I mean, they're not supposed to. I mean, all issues, changed all the time.
While that was happening, you're shying away from answering my questions. While that was happening, how did you feel when you had American soldiers on the ground fighting Lebanese people, Lebanese-born?
Well,
did you approve of that? Did you agree with it? You did not like it?
Well, we didn't like what came out of it. We did agree. We did need some help. They came as peacekeepers, but it didn't happen. They didn't act as peacekeepers. And this is what they even escalated the problems in the country.
But didn't the situation that you're talking about is they went in as peacekeepers, but then were attacked? There was a huge tragedy with the Marines
they were attacked after. That's why they were attacked. It wasn't that just they went there as peacekeeper and someone attacked them. But because the way they acted there, they didn't act as peacekeepers, and that's why people were angry, and they created enemies there, and that's why they were attacked.
Now, I want to go to Scott in this part, because one of the things I felt in the United States is the news coverage as fair and amazing. I would say, I enjoy the freedom of press in the United States a lot. But as much as Americans are enjoying freedom of speech, yet the news coverage is you feel like they are blindfolded. They only focus on local issues, and they just really, the coverage in the United States is very localized. And I'll give you an example. The CNN we watched in our region, CNN International, is amazing channel. It has a very worldwide scope. They cover almost everything in the world, and it's a channel you sit glued to watch. When I came here to the States, I'm surprised. CNN is nothing but Trump and internal politics and the Congress, there's nothing covered worldwide. Going back to you, you had a small idea, and you kept saying that you're not so much aware of what happened in Lebanon during that time. Why do you agree with me that the American media is very localized, the American news coverage is very localized? Americans don't know much about the world.
Generally, I would say yes, but we also have access to other news sources than American
what?
sources. The BBC.
I guess that's the only one that's more of an international scope, but the rest of them, CNN, Fox, NBC, ABC, all of them are very localized.
Of course, I don't know if localized is the right thing. I mean, those are national networks, and they're
localized
national,
as American, they only cover American things. That's my local as
correct.
Local American, not
correct.
Like city.
And you're absolutely right too that the coverage of a foreign issue is going to be from the American side of the issue.
From the American
politically,
angle.
yeah.
Why do you think that's the case? Like when I came here, I felt like they intentionally don't want American to know what's happening in the world. They want to have them blindfolded and just only focused on the internal things.
Well, news in any country is propaganda for the controlling party, isn't it?
It depends on the country, but yes, usually
in every
there
country,
is a
it doesn't
channel.
depend on the country. In
So
every
you believe
country,
this
it's
happens in the
same
United
way.
States?
Of course.
You believe the news is propaganda for the government, the current government?
Of course, not. But again, but there are degrees. It's not completely in the pocket of the government and promoting governmental policies. But yes, there is a bit of that. There is a bent towards supporting American policy. Yes.
Regardless of what channel, because you have different approaches in CNN or NBC versus Fox, for instance, they do cover things totally opposite directions, you would imagine.
Not when it comes to international news. When it comes to international issues, they're pretty.
They are on one direction.
American policy is pretty much American policy.
Growing up in the Middle East, like myself, we are used to watching more international news. We know what's happening in the world, I would say, more than it is for Americans. What do you think? Do you agree with me on that?
I do agree. Yeah, we always watch the world news. We cover, our news stations covers everywhere. International, and they really do cover everything, everything all over the world, especially United States.
But does it cover it? But it covers it based on whoever is in power. It covers
Depends
the
on
side
the
of it by
channel,
whoever is in power.
Again, there are different channels.
And I don't want to call it pure propaganda, but it's propaganda.
No. I mean, there are different channels, different direction channels. There are, of course, like here, same thing, but they do cover the international issues, Even in the United States, if you have issues, you are on the local side here, you have issues, you are discussing this, we'll see it, we'll watch it, we'll see what's going on, regardless of the station's opinion, but it's being covered.
Yeah, that's the difference, I guess. That
that's a big difference.
Even that you're saying all of the international, all of the news channels in here, when they cover news, it's covered from the foreign news, it's covered from the angle of the American interest. But in our region, even the propaganda channels that belongs to the government still covers all international news. And I have to say, Lebanon is considered really fairly, they have freedom of press there. You can say whatever you want now, compared to the rest of the Arab world, I have to say.
That's why Lebanon is always being different than the Middle East countries, because the freedom of speech, and which is basically allowed all countries, the Middle Eastern countries, that's before the Civil War, I'm talking, to have, whatever they want to say, they would say it from Lebanon. They have.
That's why most of the proxy wars happened in
newspaper,
in
magazines, all the political, printed media, it all comes from Lebanon.
Yeah.
And that belongs to any country in the Middle East, because we were like very open, freedom of speech.
Lebanon was and still is. Now, back to you, Scott. You said that you do understand that the United States has its fingers in other countries' politics, which you're okay with if it guarantees the power and clout of the United States to a certain extent. Now, I want to flip the argument and you are very upset that Russia has something to do with the American elections. Yet you admitted that the United States has its hands in every other country. Isn't that hypocritical in a way? Isn't that hypocrisy? You're okay that if you are the aggressor, but you're not okay being attacked by another country.
It might be a bit hypocritical, but yeah. But yeah,
I admire your honesty.
It's the first time that another country has obviously meddled in an institution that Americans hold very dear to their hearts. Yeah, so it might be a little bit hypocritical, but it's the first time that it's happened to the United States, and quite frankly, I'm worried about where we're going with this.
Now, you're on the other hand, here comes a politically incorrect question. You are Arab, and you voted for Trump, and you still support him. People would say Trump has not really been friendly with Arabs. So,
No.
how do you see that?
You know, I don't take everything from that side.
Yeah.
You know, from being an Arab or Lebanese. You know, I mean, now I live in the United States. I've been here for 30 years. So not every decision I make or I think of comes from that part.
He answered a good question. So you feel like you're now
I'm
integrated
I'm
in
an
the
American,
society.
I'm related. I belong. I feel like I belong. I've been here 30 years. You know, I had the opportunities. You know, and that's what I take into consideration. Basically, when I make a decision or anything. Yeah.
No, okay. So explain to me, why did you vote for Trump? Why do you think he's a good president?
Well,
Why do you still support him?
As I said, I'm not a political analyst, but
Tell me from your point of view.
My point of view is, I think this country needed a change, needed a major change. You know, we've been saying, you know, this for a long time, and we've been seeing all this along. You know, nothing changing, nothing like major change. You know, I mean, we're going from one presidency into another, from Democrat into Republican. So we were in the same circle, basically. That's how I feel. I mean, so we needed
some people
change.
would argue that the United States was the strongest
different,
country in the whole world. Why would you want to change that if you don't need a change?
Well, we need a change in everyday living, you know, in a lot of issues, you know. We don't want to discuss the issues, you know, but a lot of issues on taxes, on government involvement in your businesses, and everything, on all bases. You know, we need to change here, locally change. I'm not talking about international. And because it's a superpower, it's a strong country, it's a good country, and so you need to go forward with this.
Do you think being Arab, it makes you less of a citizen? Do you feel that this
I
is...
don't feel it. No, to be honest, I don't.
You don't think this way?
No.
Have you ever faced any racism or discrimination because you were Arab?
No.
No. In your 20 years stay in the United States, you have never faced any discrimination?
Any discrimination, no.
Okay, that's very interesting. Now we go to the other side.
You also have to, he lives in New York.
Even though I know
New York is a very cosmopolitan and accepting society. That's a very good point.
It didn't happen to me, but I know it did happen to other people that I know. You know.
Now, Scott McCarthy, you're in the other aisle. You, again, as we said in the intro, some would imagine that you are the white privilege. You know, why would you want to change what's happening? Why do you support Democrats?
Well, you bring up white privilege, which is very interesting, but being a Democrat, you're very inclusive. You believe that everybody deserves a seat at the table. We are not a country of one race. We're not a country of one nationality. We're a country of many. We're a country of many ideas, and everybody deserves a place at the table. Simply put, that is one of the main reasons.
You know, I'll say something you wouldn't like, and it might be considered provocative to some of the people watching, but I'm a reporter. I still work for news for Egyptian national television, and I've interviewed lots of Americans, especially during the election time. And I always ask, why do you support the party you're supporting? And I have to say, usually Republicans would come with a certain clear answer, which you didn't do, by the way. But they usually say, because I want tax cuts, because I want more jobs, because I want border control. They have a certain clear answer to what they want. Democrats, on the other hand, excuse my French, don't take it personal, but they always give me this philosophical, grand Mother Teresa-like answer because it's welcome for everyone. But they don't give me a certain issue that they are. You vote for. That's what you want. A measurable
because
issue.
It's a very complicated answer. It's not a simple answer. If you want to talk about,
just give me something that will make you satisfied.
If you want to talk about taxes and the differences between the Democrats and the Republicans on taxes, we can talk about that. If you want to talk about personal freedoms, if you want to talk about, I throw out another issue. But everything is there are many issues that it's a complicated question.
Angle. Now, with
Republican, I'll give you the reason that you can tell that. Republican attitude is me, me, me. Well, how does this affect me? And they don't care about anybody else. A Democrat tends to say, how does this policy affect the greater society? And so philosophically, if you want to say, why are you a Democrat? It's because the Democrats think societally.
Apparently, I was wrong. I thought that this would be the one and only episode I'm hosting here, but I was just told that there would be another episode. So we'll see you another time with my lovely guests, Anwar Khidr. Thank you for being with us.
You're welcome.
And Scott MacArthur. We'll see you again next week.
Hope so. Thank you.
Hopefully so. Please follow us and please tell me what you think. You will always find me on Twitter at KareemAwadalla.com. We'll have it written on the screen. So please tell me what you think of the episode. We are really, spreading out now. You pay only 2.5.
By the way, that is not
equal.
The tariffs is not a Republican or a Democratic issue. Republicans are against the tariffs too. The
one
tariffs
who was
are
leading.
That's a Trump issue. That's not a Republican or a Democratic issue. Republican businessmen are completely against the tariffs. So that
it's
has
affecting
nothing to
their
do with
businesses because they used to buy cheap, supplies from other countries. Now they have to pay tariffs on it. But I just wanted to ask you the question of, you were saying Republicans don't want to have any regulations. Now you have regulations and you're still not happy. That the regulation of having tariffs on Chinese cars is actually supposedly going to benefit American.
That is not a regulation. That's a tax.
That taxes are parts of regulations. These are things based.
It's not the same thing. Regulations are rules on how you.